Hey everyone, and welcome back to Horror Movies for Life YouTube channel. I'm your host Brian, and we're going to start taking a look at horror anthologies based on the poll on my channel that you guys picked this series for July 2025. Just like I mentioned in my intro video, the first one we're going to look at is a sequel to a pretty well-known horror anthology. A horror anthology movie that many people consider to be the greatest horror anthology movie. The sequel to that, which is, drum roll, Creepshow 2 from 1987, which I have on DVD here, part of the Midnight Madness series. Yeah, Creepshow 2, believe it or not, I've had it in my collection for a couple of years and never seen this movie before up until now. And actually, I've only seen the original Creepshow twice. I watched it about a year ago, and I upgraded it to the Scream Factory sort of box, not box set, but box Blu-ray collector's edition, whatever it's called. And then I watched it this last weekend in anticipation of watching this, as well as watching it for my 1982 series, which is coming up for my overall 1980s horror series in August here. Of course, I'm rewatching all the 1982 horror movies that I already reviewed on my channel. So it had a reason to watch it. And so that's only the second time I've seen that movie. First time I've seen this movie. So let's just go ahead and get into Creepshow 2 from 1987. Creepshow 2 is a 1987 comedy horror anthology film directed by Michael Gornick and is a sequel to Creepshow. Gornick was previously the cinematographer of the first film, and the screenplay was written by George A. Romero, who was the director of the original film. The film stars were Lois Chiles, George Kennedy, Dorothy Lamar, and Tom Savini. It was once again based upon stories by Stephen King. So Stephen King and George Romero still were involved in this movie, even though they didn't have as much involvement as they did with the original movie. So I'll just start with the prologue here. In the small town of Dexter, Maine, a delivery truck pulls up to a newsstand. Billy, a young boy, eagerly follows the truck on his bike. The truck's back shutter opens and reveals the creep, who drops off the copies of the latest issue of Creepshow, which has the same cover as the comic and the final scene of the previous film, before vanishing. Billy picks up an issue and begins to read it. And then that's what gets us into our stories here. So the first story is entitled Old Chief Woodenhead. In a small town called Dead River, Ray and Martha Spruce are an elderly couple who run the small town's general store, whose decor includes a cigar store Indian named Old Chief Woodenhead. So that's the first story. The second story is The Raft. In mid October, four college students, Deke, Laverne, Randy, and Rachel, arrive at Cascade Beach at a desolate lake far from civilization for some fun. While swimming to a wooden raft in the middle of the lake, Randy witnesses a duck being pulled underwater by an unseen force. And then the third and final story is The Hitchhiker. Annie Lansing, an adulterous Maine businesswoman, wakes up and gets out of bed after sleeping with her gigolo lover. Annie realizes that she only has 15 minutes before her attorney husband, George, arrives home. So she hops in the car and races for home several miles away. A spilled ember from a cigarette causes Annie to lose control of her car on a slippery corner where she runs down a Dover bound hitchhiker. So yeah, that's those are the three stories for Creepshow 2. And then there's the prologue, there's an epilogue, and then unlike the original movie, this has what's called an interlogue. So like a wraparound between the three stories here. And yeah, think that pretty much sums it up. I'm not gonna get into it. It basically follows Billy, the young boy that I talked about in the prologue, and a little bit of the creep from the prologue. You kind of see him throughout the interlogues as well as the epilogue at the end. So yeah, that's Creepshow 2 in a nutshell. I'm not going to give you the cast. I kind of already gave you the film stars. George Kennedy's the biggest one, Lois Chiles, and Dorothy Lamar, as well as Tom Savini, who plays the creep in this movie. Um, so yeah, my thoughts on this one. Not as good as the original, and I even have my issues with the original, to be honest with you. If you've watched my review for that, I really like the original Creep Show. I don't think it's the greatest horror anthology, not for me anyway, because of those issues. But I can say that it's certainly better than this one, and that's not to say that this is a bad anthology movie. And I hate to make direct comparisons, but the fact is, I just watched the original 3 days earlier, and it's called Creepshow 2, so there's going to be direct comparisons. I think it's a pretty good movie unto itself as a horror anthology from the 1980s, but as a follow up to the original Creepshow and a sequel, it's about half as good as the original Creepshow, I would say. So let's just go ahead and get into it, starting with the things that I liked about it, starting with the pros. And I have to say, I think all three stories um, are pretty good. They have interesting premises, good writing. You can still tell that Stephen King and George Romero. Stephen King wrote the stories, and then George A. Romero adapted them to a movie by writing the screenplay. And their presence is still felt in this Creep Show movie, even though George Romero wasn't the director like he was in the original. And Stephen King has a small cameo in one of the stories in this movie where he was like one of the main, the only person actually in one of the stories in the original Creep Show. So they kind of, so a bit of a step back from those two, but there's still some involvement there. So that's good. Um, there is some really great practical gore effects. That's really the biggest thing I can say about this movie. Especially in the stories of the raft and the hitchhiker. Great gore effects, great practical effects that I really enjoyed. So that I thought really carried forward pretty well from the original Creep Show movie. This is a personal preference, but I do like that they kind of removed the comic book sort of. I don't know how you would describe it, but like the comic book background that comes up whenever something unexpected happens or scary, like the first movie had. I'm just not a big fan of that. It kind of takes me out of the stories. That was one of my issues with the original Creepshow movie. They don't do it here, and I kind of like that, frankly. I know I'm probably in the minority on that. But to me, it's a little bit too much like the Batman show from the 60s. Like whenever they have that background, I'm waiting for pow, zoinks to come up like you'd see in that Batman show. So I didn't miss that here. Um, I'm trying to think of any other pros. I don't have a whole lot. I mean, it's a good anthology from the 1980s. It really is. I thought the performances for the most part were pretty good, other than the young people from the raft. Their acting isn't anything to write home about. But obviously, you have George Kennedy and Dorothy Lamour, Tom Savini. I mean, his acting's not great. He's the creep, so he's hardly in the movie, frankly. And Lois Chillis. I thought they were all good. Um, but yeah, practical effects are good, interesting stories. Now let's get into the cons. Those interesting stories are not well directed or well executed nearly as well as they were in the first original Creepshow movie, and that's where not having George A. Romero as the director really hurts. I don't really know much about the guy, the director Michael Gornick. I know he directed a couple of Tales from the Dark Side episodes and some other things. Like it said, he was known as a cinematographer, and then somehow ended up directing this. I just again, in comparison, it just doesn't hold up. But it's not the worst thing I've ever seen. But that was something that I really felt. You can really feel the low budget nature of this movie a lot more than the original. Now, I don't know what the big differences were in terms of budget from the first movie to this movie, but whether there was a huge drop in budget for this movie, it felt like there was a huge drop in budget in this movie from the original. I'm sure there was a bit of a drop in budget, but I just think the lack of execution, and especially the wraparound, having this cheap, bad looking animation that they used, I would have preferred that they didn't have any wraparound, frankly. Like in the first movie, you have an epilogue and or you have a prologue and an epilogue, but it's all like live action. There's no animation. Um, the only animation is the creep, and that's another con. I prefer the look of the creep a lot more in the first movie. He doesn't look anything like this. This is misadvertising or false advertising. the creep played by Tom Savini is basically a goblin in this movie, and he's only like the live action version of the goblin's only on screen for maybe 4 or 5 minutes and the entire movie. But yeah, this movie just has much more of a low budget feel and nature to it. Just not as grand in scope as the original was, not as that well executed, very cheap looking with the animation wraparound segments. I just thought that part was unnecessary. And then also, I felt like the three stories dragged a little bit. I think there was a missed opportunity where you do have three interesting stories here, but I think they should have trimmed the fat in terms of the padding and the dragness of those stories. I think they could have added a fourth or even a fifth story, and just like the first movie had five stories, this could have had five movies if they would have, or five stories, I should say, if they would have tightened up the three stories that they had and got rid of the animated wraparound. But that's not what they did, and as a result, these stories, all three of them have moments where they just kind of, come on, let's move it along here. That's what I was feeling anyway, and I really didn't feel that in the first movie. And as I said, the creep, I didn't like the look of the creep, not only compared to the original movie, but also in the Creepshow TV series from the last 5 or 6 years. He looks much more like this, which is the better version for sure of the creep. So I don't know. It sounds like I'm ripping this movie. I'm still going to give it a 7 out of 10 because as a horror anthology movie, especially from the '80s, this works pretty well, and it's fun and it's entertaining for the most part. It's the problem is I'm comparing it directly to the original Creepshow, and I can't help it because I just watched that movie like 3 days ago, and like I said, even though I don't, that it's not a perfect movie either. I have my issues with that. It is a lot better than this one, in my opinion, which I find kind of interesting because I've heard people say over the years that some people prefer Creepshow to the original Creepshow. I wouldn't say that was the majority. I would say the majority still like the original Creepshow better. But I was surprised with all the people that said that they prefer Creepshow too. Maybe it's because of like the comic book um, aesthetics and background that I was talking about. Maybe it was the fact that there was too many stories for them and they like having three. I don't really know, but to me, there's no way for me this is better than the original. It's a good anthology, but not a great Creepshow movie. That's the best way to say it. 7 out of 10 though for Creepshow 2 from 1987. Go ahead and comment down below what you guys think of Creepshow 2, both in comparison to the original Creepshow and it's just a horror anthology overall. Because I have to remember, I'm reviewing this as a horror anthology, not completely anyway, a direct sequel to the original, even though I am. So, but comment down below, like this video, hit the little notification bell, and if you want, please subscribe to my channel. It would really help me out. Um, yeah, I do enjoy the movie, but I think I am going to keep the DVD for now. I know there's an upgraded version on Blu-ray from Arrow, I believe, just like I got through Scream Factory for the original Creepshow. I don't really have a strong desire or like rush to go out and get that. I'm okay with this for now, to be honest with you. The original I did want to upgrade. This one, I'm okay with this. It looks fine. It's a DVD, but it looks fine. So there's that. But 7 out of 10 as far as an anthology goes. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this review, and I still have 7 more horror anthologies that we're going to be looking at throughout the month of July. So stay tuned for that. With all that being said, thank you for watching, and as always, stay scared. Bye.